Well, I did cite Microsoft as an example exactly of that, where for 6 years they did not have support from the top. For 6 years they were laboring under a management that was totally top down, totally focused on making money, totally confrontational. That there are examples like that. Now, if they'd picked a different CEO, if they'd picked a CEO like Steve Ballmer, I agree. Most of those agilists would have left and they would have said, look, Microsoft is dead. But it turned out the other way because in the sessions leading up to the appointment of a new CEO, what was happening within Microsoft was a feeling that not why do we have to be agile, which had been the earlier thought, but how do we get what they're getting? How do we have the kind of results that they're having? And so there was a movement within Agile to say, look, we have to change. We need a different kind of leadership. And that movement was successful. And they didn't get a second Steve Ballmer. They got someone who would take the lead. If I just cite my own example at the World Bank, I was actually being fired by the World Bank because there was a kind of a whole group of people who wanted to run the organization differently. And I was basically told to pack my bags, but I wasn't quite ready to leave and they let me hang around. And within a year, I had launched a new strategic initiative, which the president of the World Bank loved. And I was appointed now the director in charge of this, and we became a world leader in knowledge management. So it is possible to make change. It's obviously much easier if the top is supportive, but it certainly is possible. Let's take another question. Who's next? Luke?
Alex, I think you're up actually.
Yeah. Alex, you're up.
I'm up. Okay. All right. I love I guess a statement that innovation is everyone's responsibility, including his, that Satya made. And that's something we are struggling with in our journey right now. We're looking at sort of where is that mindset shift happening, and it looks like it's only happening at the team level. And things we are doing to monitor that are, for example, when we have our epics or our strategy coming down, are they thinking in experiments? Are they testing out the strategy early? It didn't seem to be happening there. So we're looking at signals to give us an idea if mindsets were shifting at that executive level versus only at the team level. So I'm curious from Miriam and Steve, if, how you have looked at that innovation being everyone's responsibility, and what kind of signals have you looked at?
Well, Miriam can speak for Bank of the West, but obviously my whole writing career has been to try to encourage this to happen throughout the whole organization, and everything I do is aimed at that, and my new books are aimed at that, and these webinars are aimed at it. But it's everyone's responsibility, and you might decide that this environment is just too hostile, and I'm not going to waste my time here and move on. And at one point in his talk, Bill Anderson says, yes, I mean, without the top, you're not going to make it. Eventually, you have to have the top. But so everyone has to make their own decision. There are an increasing number of firms that are heading in this direction. Michael Lurie, who invited Bill Anderson, keeps telling me there are loads of CEOs who are leading this charge, even if they're not at the top. They may be a senior vice president. And I said, okay, bring them along to our conference and let them hear. So he brought along Bill Anderson. And so there is proof in the pudding that this is happening. And I think what we're seeing in the economy and the fate of corporations that are not on this track, it's inexorable that this will happen. It's just a matter of time and trying to expedite something that is going to happen anyway.
Yeah, and I would like to add, Alex, just on the practical side of what you're saying is you've got to decide to make a bold statement. So for us, it was changing product owner to the idea of product ownership. So that dialogue, that the discipline that comes into understanding what it means to own a product from the conception all the way to its retirement, really bringing back these fundamentals that we seem to have forgotten. A product has a life cycle. You need to have a purpose. What problem are you solving? I think sometimes you have to go back to the basics. And so for what I'm hearing from you, and I'm hoping I'm interpreting this correctly, because I'm in the trenches, is that you definitely need to have a shift. It doesn't have to be radical, but maybe just going back to the basics and re-establishing the idea of product ownership, not being a product owner. What does that mean for the organization, for the individual? I think that it might come a long way. If you send me an email, I'll send you our deck so that you can kind of see how we decided to solve for that. And I can tell you once again, it has been successful. It's not like theory here. We've done practice, and hearing people calling themselves mini CEOs for a product changes everything. They're not laying bricks, they're building a hospital. They're, you ask them, that's what they'll say. 6 months ago, a year ago, they'd be like, I'm laying bricks, but now they know they're building a hospital and they have ownership to that. So love to share that with you. And I think, I hope I answered your question on the practical execution piece of it. Did I, Alex? Okay, perfect.
Who's next?
Charlotta.
Carlotta.
Hi, Carlotta.
Hi. I was wondering, listening to Miriam, whether there is a difference between a production company that has customers that are just regular people that are and a bank or a financial company, because I imagine there are things that a bank does which are actually for customers, loans and things like that. But a financial company, as some of you might know, that my work makes a big difference between production capital and financial capital. And since financial capital is about making money with money, somehow, I wonder if it's possible to have a customer-oriented policy in an organization whose role is to make money from money rather than. Am I thinking that is something different, or is it the same?
Well, from my point of view, I mean, there's a few things. I want to just kind of uncouple this for a bit. So are you talking about consumer packaged goods versus a bank, which is financial, basically money? Are you talking about that kind of differentiation between the industries?
Well, I'm talking about financial, financial banks, which are not really lending, but investing for people.
Okay.
So what they're doing is really money for money. So that's the purpose. So
right.
How does the customer come in there? I somehow find that there might be a difference. And one of the problems that we have in Reinventing Capitalism is how do we change finance from that very separate thing that just works like a casino? And,
I like that. So I like that casino. I was going to move towards wealth management. So you're talking more about wealth management, but I like the casino. And I really think that that's really an interesting piece of the puzzle. One of the things that Shannon, when we were getting ready for Vienna, we talked about was this idea of, capitalism can't just be for the few. It has to be for the many. So by de facto, investment and wealth management moves into the few. So I think it has to be somewhat of more of a Canadian point of view and a European point of view if we're going to compare capitalism, because again, I'm Canadian, so we have more of a socialist approach. So I think, honestly, I don't have a perfect answer, but I can tell you that it is complicated, but ultimately in the end of it, it is about the individual. These financial institutions, they're people. People are paying money for this. So the individual itself is driving a lot of these capitalisms. And just like you can't say an organization does this, it's individuals in an organization. So I don't know if I've helped you with that, but that's just my point of view. I'm sure Steve will have a polar difference in terms of what he wants to answer. But for me, that's what I'm seeing. I always bring it right back to the person, back to the fact that an institution has people, an organization has people, wealth management companies has people, and people willing to pay to have more money in this wonderful world of capitalism.
I mean, I would say that the banks have customers, and so long as they have customers, banks that create more value for their customers are going to be more successful than those that focus on their own profits. And that is one aspect of the issue. There are other aspects where some of the money is unrelated to customers and is simply gambling and speculation and a whole lot of questionable practices, and those need to be dealt with differently. But where there are customers, I think there is not a huge difference between banks and other organizations. But we can discuss that in more detail maybe next week.
Actually, Steve, I think it's a great topic. And just on topic, Jamie Dimon, Steve's favorite CEO, made a comment about cryptocurrency. And I literally was drinking my tea and I went down the wrong way. He made a comment saying that anybody that's involved with cryptocurrency is basically like, it's like having a pet rock. And so I thought about how polarizing that statement was. But it is interesting that even leaders in the financial industry are also trying to understand what new capitalism is going to look like. Really, what is it going to be to reinvent? I think that's why Steve's book is so topical now. There's just so many facets, so many pieces of this new financial and new customer-driven world. Like, but what does it really mean to reinvent capitalism? So I'd love for us to continue that conversation, Charlotta, if you ever want to, because I think it'd be interesting.
No, I don't think we haven't yet seen what a bank can do in this new world. We haven't seen the equivalent of an Apple have banking. So and until we see that, I think we're sort of grasping at straws. But it's a failure partly of imagination and execution, and some sectors are much more advanced than others. And I think banking has not been in the forefront, but with Bank of the West and Bank of Montreal, I mean, there's an opportunity to be the bank that actually creates a bank that's suitable for the 21st century.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears. Thank you, Steve.
What else have we got?
I think that's the only hand that was up, last hand that was up. So,
any other question?
Steve, Jose.
Hello. So it's really a fascinating conversation. Many of the topics, and I have a mixed feeling about some of the things that we're discussing here today, because I have the opportunity to try many of this. So I would say this process is not new for the organization where I belong and work. So we have started this a long time ago, and we have great successes in some parts of the company. The company is a large company with 130,000 people in the world. And we also have other parts that are not so easy to change. And during all of those processes, and of course, Agile for us, it's not new anymore. It was new maybe a couple of years ago, but today it's not new. And what we find, it's very difficult to really be in the middle between what is the strategy, what is coming from the top of the company, and of course the lower bases of the company, and also middle management, which has a very important role. We find out that this sometimes is very difficult to change. And the reason is behind, that's my personal interpretation, is that the cultural change this implies, it's key. And why it's key? Because people, they need to change a part of their belief. They need to change a part of their vision. And of course, this is also something that management will work in many cases to transform, to give the right information to people, the right vision, the right strategy. All of this needs to be in place. But there is one thing that is key, is people need to understand their role and what's in it for them. Otherwise, this cultural change that people need to go, this journey, it's much more difficult. So this is the normal process with ups and downs, of course. And I have also an opportunity to be attached to a different environment inside the company, which is more a startup environment, which is, let's say, I would dare to say that is a different environment where everything is discussed. I liked a lot Bill Anderson's approach, where sometimes things look like a chaos, but it's a fruitful chaos. So people are more participative, more engaged, more able to say what they think. Even in many cases, people don't know exactly the direction, and that is the case. And when I compare both environments, I would say that it's much more easier to change and to progress and get into the, let's say, to the outcome of the capitalism in this new digital age, in this type of environment. Changing a company like Microsoft, and the example of Microsoft is unbelievable in terms of success. So at the end of the day, when I compare these two things, what you advise changing a major company with lots of countries, lots of people, lots of organizations inside. So at the end, my question is very simple. Do we need to push for change itself? And this means transforming a part of the company. I know Microsoft has fired a lot of people, has engaged a lot of new people. Is this the way or the only way to accelerate the process, or there are other ways to accelerate this process?
Well, there is no simple answer. There is no simple take the following 7 steps and you're done. No. And different companies are different, as I was trying to illustrate, with quite a big difference between the starting point for Roche and the starting point for Microsoft in terms of culture and in terms of the direction of the company. They were almost radical opposites. So you need to, first of all, figure out where you are, where the company is. And what I found was that firms didn't really know where they are. They weren't able to articulate where they are. Well, we're making some money and we haven't totally collapsed yet, but they had no real way of describing where they are in terms of what is going on in management. And even more so, they had no vision of what success looked like. Particularly, I listened to all the speeches at the Drucker Forum a couple of weeks ago, and none of those speakers, I have to say, had any articulate vision of what successful management looks like in the 21st century. And so what I'm doing is saying, look, here is a vision of what success looks like. And so we can start to say, analyze where we are today. And we can look at different parts of the company, as you say, different parts of Fujitsu are at different stages. And we can start to then say, do we want to get to this vision that I've described or to a different vision? And then we can start to discuss step by step which are the most urgent things to tackle and which are the most important things to tackle. And I would tend to agree with you that the leadership at the top is essential. And if the leadership at the top can articulate a vision, as it seems like Bill Anderson was able to do, or Satya Nadella was able to do in their organizations, that staff in wherever they were in the organization could start to think, if what I'm doing isn't furthering that mission, why am I doing it? Why don't I just either stop, or I tell the manager I'm going to stop and have an instruction to stop doing things that are useless. There's a wonderful book that I love called Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber. And it estimates that at least 40% of jobs in most big organizations are totally useless, not serving any customer or any purpose. They're just doing things which are done because they've always been done. Now, Elon Musk said the real figure is 75%. He also says some other crazy things, but it's clearly not zero. It's clearly the large number of things going on in the organization which have totally useless, unless the organization is something of a kind that I've not seen before.
Yeah, so I'd like to add, Jose, the fact when you talked about the adults, the people in your company, the resources, that one of the things that we tend to do, and I'm always going back to basics, that's what I always try to do, is we try to treat adults like when you're in university, when you're in school. saying that this is what you're doing. You mentioned this idea about this clarity of vision and empowerment. And to me, part of the solution comes back to understanding that adults will do what benefits them. I've seen so many campaigns that are just about this highfalutin vision. I'm just like, yeah, no. So the slide that Steve hates is a slide, please take a look at, which makes individuals see what is it in for me. I believe if you don't translate that effectively, you're going to lose. And that's why any kind of agility transformation, agile transformation has to have and embody the change management piece of it, the people part of it. I think that we forget that that's important, right? Culture does eat strategy for breakfast. So how do you build that culture? It's really taking it back to basics. So you'll always hear me saying depends, but ultimately I say go back to the basics, because somewhere along the line, you've missed a possibly amazing opportunities to give 20% effort for 80% of results. And sometimes people just don't like going back to the fundamentals. They do not. They get brought in by consultants. I've been into so many companies. This is my 5th transformation where they bought a package that was never fit for purpose. And now leadership is not happy millions of dollars later, in addition to having sometimes executive coaches who basically talk it, but don't practice it. So there's so many things that really challenge an organization that wants to be bold and wants to move into agility. And I think sometimes you just need to take stock, to Steve's point, where are you? And be honest. And then from there, find a solution forward. That's my kind of basic Miriam 101. Hope it helps.
Okay.
I agree with that, but just to put on my, as the Learning Consortium had for a moment, these are the kinds of issues that we discuss in the Learning Consortium, and we'd love to visit Fujitsu. We'd love Fujitsu to think about finding out more about the Learning Consortium and maybe even joining it on a trial basis, and then seeing whether this would be a way to accelerate the discussion within your organization.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, Miriam.
You're welcome.
Got a question from Hadi.
Hi, Steve, you mentioned about World Bank, and you mentioned that you were ready to leave, and I was just curious, what did you see that made you stay, and you thought that you can make a big difference?
Well, I wasn't quite ready to leave, as my pension hadn't vested, wouldn't vest for another 4 years. So I didn't really want to leave all that money on the table, and particularly as the World Bank, you didn't have U.S. citizenship, so it was complicated. Would have been complicated for me to leave at that time. So I stayed on, but actually I was. The World Bank is a wonderful organization. I mean, they have unlimited resources. They have the brightest people in the world. They have a mission to die for, and I still strongly believed in the mission. And if there was a group of managers who were on a different track, my job was to set them aside or go over their heads and get a change. And that's ultimately what I did. And that I was basically told I didn't have a job and that I wasn't fired. And I looked around and I was told to look into information, and we were drowning in information. And I thought, well, we could fix that easily, but we would still be the same organization which was underperforming because it was a bureaucracy and not at all responsive to the mission that it had. And so I said, we could actually do something bigger. We could actually share our knowledge with the world. The internet had just happened, and we could start to share our knowledge with the world. So I set out to persuade the organization we will become the world's leading knowledge sharing organization. And there were a whole lot of Centurion guards who tried to block it and kill it, and block me and kill me. But they were unsuccessful because I managed to have someone get this to the new president of the World Bank, and he fell in love with the idea. And suddenly this was now the future strategy of the organization. And he was announcing this to the finance ministers of the world, and I was now appointed to be director to lead this charge. And so we did become the world's leading organization in knowledge management. So this that was someone who was being fired essentially by the organization, but didn't take that as a reason to stop doing what I wanted to do. And so I set out to do the right thing. And so that's what I'm saying to the 53% of the people in this group who are in organizations where they don't have strong support from the top. Don't give up because of that. See what is possible. It may be possible to do a lot more than you imagine if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I love that story when Steve talks about it. When I first heard it, I pictured Steve like hiding behind his desk, when someone came into a room, hiding in the closet. Can you imagine being told your job? Yeah, we don't have anything for you. But Steve didn't do that. He didn't just, let this happen. He created a new opportunity. And that's what I think it's always going to be about, the instilling this idea of doing something new, reinventing and disrupting. I'm a disruptor, as if you hadn't noticed that. So I believe that you can do things differently. You can be successful. So I love that story. And just imagine that big vision and look at where the World Bank is now. It starts with this one passionate person that drives so much change. I get excited about that story all the time.
Yeah, I work with different companies, and every company is different. It's like you have a different patient when you go to a company, and you have to be more, I guess, looking at the possibilities. And I love what you mentioned, that when the management changed, you saw pretty much the support. Thanks for sharing.
Great, excellent. So Hadi, I was just going to say one quick thing. You talked about you work with different companies. I think that that's the mistake a lot of people make, thinking it's a one size fits all. So I'm glad that you recognize that, because again, each culture is different. And if you try to bamboozle a company into being something they can never be, you're just never going to be successful, and you're going to have frustration. I think it may have been Jared that said the idea of people waiting to just go to the next step. Like, okay, when is this going to be ended? Somebody said that. So I think that it's important you recognize that everybody's journey is going to be different, but it's going to be a journey. And that's something that, you need to really start articulating. And it's going to be sometimes painful. And you're going to have the frozen middle. You decide to chop it, melt it, right? Ignore it isn't going to help you. So you do have to deal with these things that are blockers. So back to the basics. What are these obstacles that are stopping you from being successful? I think that's why the tool works, because it makes you think about it differently. And what you think it is might not be what it actually is. So I say it's a simple discipline. So we have it, it's free. You can just reach out to Steve and I will send it to you. It's still beta. We're playing around and making it, but we have it automated now. So anybody who wants to use it, just use it. It's a simple tool, but it does get you thinking.
I mean, we are saying that every company is different, but we are also saying there are patterns. There are some patterns that are almost uniformly bad and should be stopped and as being counterproductive to every stakeholder. And there are some other patterns which are emerging, which are proving to be hugely productive for all the stakeholders, not just for the shareholders, not just for the customers, not just for the company, but the whole of society. When you have firms which are operating like this, they can, as I think Roche showed very nimbly, how you can weave social and environmental goals into the mission, so that this is not just paying off customers as some kind of lowly task. This is something that can be a very high-minded, noble task. You start with the customer, but you are able to help all the stakeholders of the organization.
Yeah, that's great. You just articulated what I've always said. We are customer obsessed. Everybody start being customer obsessed, and I guarantee it'll help drive you to a nice balance between innovation and disruption and delighting your customers to, before you know it, actually making profit. And I think that that's something that, is so key. I'll stay the course. I'll let everybody know how we're doing. But if we speak the same language and we stay focused, I think as an organization, think about it. We have 20 new products that are going to be at a productathon. That's huge. And that's what, we decided to do to really jumpstart our movement towards ownership and being customer obsessed, and really reinventing capitalism, bringing it inside out and outside in. So, more to come on that. But I'm very proud of what we've accomplished at the bank.
Yeah, making great progress. And thanks to all those who've stuck it out for the additional 30 minutes. Probably should bring it to a close now, and we can continue the discussion next Thursday. We'll be looking at some of these pitfalls, some of the difficulties, some of the risks, and some of the wrong turnings that have been made, and giving more examples of how to do it right. But thanks very much. We'll be circulating slides to all of you. We'll be circulating a video of at least the presentation part of the talk, and giving you a link to the full talk by Bill Anderson, and anything else you need from us, just write to me, write to Miriam, and we'd be happy to see how we can respond. But thanks a lot, and good luck on your challenge, your journey, and talk with you next week.